Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this special edition of the On the Pony Express podcast, a recruiting edition. I'm Billy Embody, excited to be with you guys. We will break down all the latest recruiting news and more on this pod as we kick off your week following SMU's loss at Wake Forest, no less. But we break down the recruiting impact and what's next for the Mustangs on this edition of the pod, which starts right now.
Remember when your biggest worry was finding parking at Dallas Hall? Now it's protecting your home, your car, maybe even that first business. That's where Northwest Insurance Agency comes in. Exclusive coverage designed by Mustangs for Mustangs who've galloped into the real world. Protect what you've built and move forward with confidence, because once a Mustang, always moving forward.
Northwest Insurance.
This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let we go.
That is right. Kicking off your Monday with some recruiting. It might help you, maybe work through this SMU loss to Wake Forest. I'm Billy Embody. You can find me at ontheponyexpress.com. Subscribe for just $1 for your first week, but you can find this pullover. Yeah, that's right. It says Pony up on it and more at Horn Legend, hornlegend.com. Our friends over there get you free shipping when you use code PONY. Love this fabric, just really breathable. And for those of you who know me, the whole sweat factor, very important as I get out there, even in times when quarter zips are acceptable when it comes to the temperature outside. I think for me, the quality is just really what has stood out to me with all of the Horn Legend gear that I've just gotten sent over to me. The SMU side of it all just came in. You saw me wear the polo last week to announce it, but the SMU stuff came in hours later. I had actually submitted for it Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening. Just terrific to see it come in as quickly as it did. So shout out Horn Legend for taking care of us. And we encourage you guys to check them out. They present our recruiting show. And of course, we want to remind you about Mark Villasana and Northwest Insurance Agency, 214-352-5656, or email them info@nwagencies.com. The recruiting impact of SMU's loss to Wake Forest, 13-12 over there in Winston-Salem. We were there. We were on site. We saw the ups of maybe seeing SMU sneak away with one, and then we saw the downs when it was taken right from them in the last 16 seconds of that ball game with the 50-yard field goal by Connor Calvert. As far as recruiting goes, when losses like this happen, now granted, you can look at Wake Forest now and see them sitting there at 5-2 overall. Nice first season for Jake Dickert. There's context to however Wake Forest is playing this year. But still, this is SMU. This is in year 4 of the Rhett Lashley era. This is a program that I thought had higher standards. I still think it does. But those standards were not met by any means on Saturday at Wake. So as far as the recruiting impact of it, you got to look at this game from the standpoint of, all right, how do we elevate things in the transfer portal? How do we make sure that the bottom line of SMU football continues to kind of go up from the standpoint of having the roster in place to avoid games like this? And you can look at programs across the country that it happens to. And this is the first loss, I would say, of the Rhett Lashley era. Maybe since year 1, you could probably argue a couple of those as far as how SMU looked in the loss that should not be acceptable, coming off of a decent era with Sonny Dykes going into the Rhett Lashley era, all those things. But Rhett Lashley hasn't really had a game that I feel like SMU's lost. And you sit there and you say, that can't happen. Now, we talked about it on the message board. There's a lot of, unacceptables and pathetics and things like that that come with a loss like that. But those are just words that are really making you feel better on a message board. Unacceptable is the best one I could think of. Is it unacceptable that SMU lost the way they did in particular? Absolutely. Do I think anyone's sitting there and accepting it? No. So how do you go forward? The nature of this type of a loss is how do you respond? Of course, on the field, SMU's 2025 team is going to have an opportunity to go out and figure that out over the next 4 games. They're going to have 4 individual opportunities, very different opponents in each of those games. When you look at it from the recruiting side of things, they're going to have this final month of the season, which equates to two home games to host potential flip targets, potential late additions, as well as junior college targets. And then you get into December when you're going to be evaluating some of these rosters as guys probably announce they're going to enter the portal, but the portal won't open until January 2nd. So that buffer zone allows you to really evaluate your roster, evaluate where you're at, see what players you want to get deals done with, what those deals look like, and if that impacts some of these players and if they end up going into the transfer portal. So that is what is next here. That's where this type of a loss, not that none of this would have happened as far as a roster evaluation standpoint, as far as a SMU needing to up the ante recruiting and things like that. All of that has been happening for the last couple of years around SMU. Their recruiting classes have gotten better. Their transfer halls, they were able to figure out I still think the right buttons to push to put together this team this year that really, from the grand scheme of things, as far as the talent they have, has underachieved in the win-loss column. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They should have beaten Baylor. They should have beaten Wake Forest. TCU beat them. You could want a better result, and you could probably say that SMU had the talent to beat TCU, but they did not execute. They did not deserve to win that game. Baylor and Wake Forest ones, SMU had the talent put together to win those games, and they should have won those games. So now when you look at recruiting and you look at the transfer portal in particular, I look at this roster, and ahead of what is going to be, I think, a really intensive look in the mirror at some point that last bye week for SMU, namely when the staff, the coaching staff that is, and the recruiting staff and the scouting department get together and they say, okay, guys, Louisville and Cal, that's the last two regular season games, got early signing period right after that. And then we've got a month to manage this roster through what is probably going to be a bowl game. And we've got to figure out who's coming back, who's out the door, and what all of this looks like. Where SMU has to maybe take a look at itself is the retention of the players is terrific. SMU has probably lost Alana Lee. You could argue Branson Hickman. You could argue Marcus Bryant. I mean, Rhett Lashley and the staff ended up not really matching those. You kind of saw the PJ Williams emerging. You saw the center position being taken over. For some reason, I can't. Ja'Kai Clark, and kind of where that all was headed with him and Justin Osborne on the roster and things like that. So they said, okay, all right, walk. But you can make the argument they should have kept those guys, and they were good players, so you don't want to down them too much. But this program as a whole has kept its roster intact at a pretty high level. They have not lost many players at all over the course of these 4 years that you sit there and say, man, Texas came in and, pre-portaled so-and-so and got one of SMU's starters away. That just hasn't really happened. And that has gotten an SMU starter that SMU wasn't able to retain. So I think there's kind of that line of, okay, SMU has done a really good job of retention. Now do you look at, hey, this is a roster that we thought all of these players were going to be better. We thought the depth was going to be this. We thought the X position was going to be better because guys stayed, because guys were getting more opportunity. Guys were getting more burn. There's a little bit of, now do you look at this from a transfer portal and roster construction perspective and say, well, now that there's an entire month before the portal opens, not everything is done in the vacuum of, okay, well, we've got to get these guys done really quickly because, okay, the portal opens in a week after the regular season and all of those things that SMU and all the programs around the country really had to deal with last year. Like all of those things are really real for these college programs. Now they get a little bit more time to evaluate. So would that change any of the roster decisions that were made going off of last year? I don't know. I don't think anybody can sit here and argue and say, oh, they should have let so-and-so walk. They should have let so-and-so walk. They should have, and list off 10 players that played big roles or solid roles for SMU that you would be okay with leaving. I don't think that was something that off of last year's team, many people were sitting there doing. You could think a player is probably not good enough or this or that, but no one's really going to be mad at retaining the roster that SMU did. They still had plenty of portal opportunities. I think we're finding out in year 2 of the ACC that, yes, SMU's depth has been tested this year by injuries. They've been tested in a number of ways, but there are still some things that maybe need to be tweaked. And it wouldn't shock me if from a roster construction perspective, things get looked at a little bit, and maybe there's opportunities to say, hey, thank you so much for what you've done. We're going to bring in so and so here. We've got our eye on a couple of kids that have announced that they're going to portal. We're talking to their agent. Let's get you in a good spot elsewhere for you to finish out your career. I could see some of that happening. I really could, because a loss to Wake Forest is not just a loss to now 5-2 Wake Forest. That is a Wake team that could not get it done offensively. SMU's defense played great. Somebody said one of the stats, I mean, as far as yardage for Wake Forest and then points, just like unbelievable. Great job SMU defense. You can see them kind of coming together and some lights coming on. But offensively is where the floor was, I mean, to have that type of an offensive showing is really, really head scratching. And you've got to look at some things along the way in recruiting to kind of write some things in the transfer portal when it comes to the roster moving forward. So do you want to break down a little bit on some of this, the 2026 class, and kind of where things are down the stretch here? So we'll do that in just a second. But of course, do want to remind you guys as well that we're presented by our friends at Status Jet. The On the Pony Express podcast is presented. Sorry. We're presented by our friends at Status Jet. Played the pre-recorded one there. But look, let Status Jet take care of the trip of your dreams by making sure you reach out to them, get on the right flight and plane, and they can plan out all of your activities on the trip, whether it be for SMU at Duke in January, get on that, or a family vacation around the holidays. Reach out to statusjet.com and check out what they've got going on. Mention On the Pony Express for a discount on a round trip flight today. Also want to remind you, we're presented by our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. Head up 75 in McKinney. Visit any of their 4 dealerships, Ford, Subaru, Volkswagen, and Mitsubishi today. Set up a service appointment. Just get the lay of the land up there, get your oil changed, experience what I've experienced, which is great care, customer service, and a great place to work too when your car service. So appreciate our friends at the Thomas Auto Group as well.
At Thomas Auto Group, the Thomas Promise includes the low price promise,
the pre-owned promise,
and the 72-hour exchange promise.
and finally, the 100% customer satisfaction promise. So shop Thomas Auto Group today, home of the Thomas Promise.
I had a really good question on the ponyexpress.com message board today in our live chat. Again, Mondays are a great day on the site for the most part, unless you're really, really living by every single kickoff time that is announced for SMU football these days. Because guess what? SMU is an 11 a.m. team. That's just what it is at this point. And that is where SMU is going to be playing Boston College next week too. When you look at this program and what they have coming in the 2026 recruiting class, it's a really, really good group of prospects that, maybe they end up getting some Horn Legend gear and some NIL deals from our friends at Horn Legend. But the group that's coming in really has a chance to play early, I think. Some of these guys walking into the program will have opportunities to make those moves and really get on the field early. And I look at the SMU offensive line as one position that we've seen a little bit of Draymond Odoms. We've seen a little bit of Abel Hoopy. SMU loses right now Zion Nelson and Savion Byrd at tackle. They lose Nate Anderson and Logan Parr at guard. One starter, one depth guy who's played a lot. Nate Anderson played a lot on Saturday. Logan Parr was dinged up. The injury report for this week's game against Miami is going to be something else. If SMU gets Andrew Chamblee and PJ Williams back, which, for Chamblee is really a retention thing. For PJ Williams, he's got to decide between the NFL and SMU. And then you have Addison Nichols as a guard. You have Josh Bates back. You have Abel Hoopy and you have Draymond Odoms. And then you have this group of offensive linemen in the 2026 class, Drew Evers, Evan Goodwin, and Papunga Katoa. And if you've ever seen them physically, one, they'll wow you. I mean, SMU has done a terrific job grabbing 3 offensive linemen that I think are college ready type of offensive lineman from a physical perspective. Like last cycle, they signed Draymond Odoms, Drew Hill, Abel Hoopy. Drew Hill was definitely one that you could kind of tell was going to need a redshirt just from getting bigger and physically stronger type of way. Draymond, you could say, okay, he needed to get stronger and add more mass and things like that, but the talent's there. He's a tackle. He can kind of play out on the edge. Abel Hoopy was a big dude. Those two, the last two, have really settled in well, and you could tell the projection for them. Drew Evers, Evan Goodwin, and Papunga Katoa are physically ready. Like, there's no question about it. Like, the work that Toa has done to reshape his body has been terrific. Evan Goodwin is he's the kind of quintessential man you're half expecting him to pull out a pack of Marlboro Reds or something because he just got off work and he's headed to, have a beer after work. I mean, he's a big dude and couldn't be nicer, and he's really excited about being at SMU. And then Drew has that body that is physically strong, can work across the offensive line. So all three of those guys are going to get an opportunity to play early. SMU will have to plug probably a transfer in there somewhere. I don't know what they do because they have Alex Woods coming back. They have King Large, Graham Uter, guys like that on the roster that could get some burn at different spots. Paris Patterson's a depth guy. But this 2026 class is going to need to kind of push the pace a little bit here and be ready to rock. And if not, it makes the transfer portal, of course, at the guard position, I would say, really important. Somebody made a great point about that. Logan Parr leaving. You got Alex Woods. You have Addison Nichols at the other guard spot. They can do some kind of work there. And who knows, maybe Graham Uter, who's kind of popped up in the depth chart a little bit as of late, could be somebody that finds himself maybe playing center, and maybe it's Josh Bates at left guard. So there's a lot of different things to kind of work through there if you're SMU. But as far as early enrollee or early playing time, I look at those three and think maybe in three very different ways we see them play and we see them get opportunities to get out onto the field. And if they can do that, that obviously helps as a whole when you look at what their future is and what they need to spend in the portal and do all of those things. So I'm interested to see obviously which one of those guys or which, how many of them enroll early. We're going to be checking on a lot of that for our On the Pony Express subscribers here very soon. But then you get into some of these other position groups and you think, okay, SMU loses all three veteran tight ends, which is very, very scary. You're going to have to portal somewhere for a tight end just to kind of take the heat off of that one, because Trip Reardon, he got some playing time when Matthew Hibner got hurt on Saturday. Adam Moore, Devon Martin, who's been out for the year with a knee injury, Miles Uter. That's the group that's back. And then you have Zach Turner and Andre Nickerson, who's coming in as the 2026 class. And they're impressive both in very different ways. So how do you get those guys to play early is important. I think Andre Nickerson has a really good chance to do it. Just physically really looks the part. Tight end's a really tough eval as a whole, but it looks like to me he's really got it. And then Zach Turner's kind of got that wide receiver production to him. So maybe he factors in from a pass catching perspective like RJ Maryland currently does. So those are two guys that will have opportunity because the depth chart after this year is really interesting as a whole. So SMU is going to have to squeeze every little bit out of the tight end room it can that it has from the guys it knows it has coming back, but then they've got to find a way to probably portal a guy there. But those two will have opportunities to play early because as we're seeing at receiver, Jalen Cooper getting some snaps, probably deserves a little bit more playing time, but he's still getting out there. SMU is starting to kind of churn the wheels a little bit on playing these guys and getting them actual playing time. Jermico Green has kind of been overtaken by Shotty Clayton Johnson, who scored his first touchdown on Saturday. And maybe they can redshirt him and you work that kind of roster building angle and you can kind of get through it. Now, you could argue, I think Jermico needs to play, but if he didn't play when SMU was out without Chris Johnson Jr., Derek McFall has kind of been, more of a gadget type. And then you have TJ Harden, who I think is clearly hurt. It looks like he's headed down that redshirt role, but we'll ask Rhett Lashley about that on Tuesday. And then, for me, somebody at wide receiver is going to play early. I think they're going to find a way. And that's a talented group. Aljor Miles, you look at losing Jordan Hudson and Romello Brinson. He's probably the one that I would say is the most, likely to, just because physically he checks the boxes. Xavier Barnett could really use the weight room for a year, but he's freaky. Ja'Kai Anderson will have Ymir Knight in front of him next year. He's pretty freaky. So there's all of those things. And then of course you'll have Link Rhodes back too. And then all the freshman receivers coming back from that 2025 class. So it's going to be hard to get on the field as a freshman at wide receiver, even though there's a ton of talent there. And then lastly, as far as an early enrollee in the early playing time in the 2026 class, man, I will say it would be a huge boost if SMU rode with a defensive tackle that rises to the top, the cream rises to the top, and they can find a way to get the most out of him. And that's Dakota Dixon for me, or Keith Doty, one of the two. Those two big defensive linemen that SMU has committed, one of them has to find a way onto the field. Tyrone Winslow is somebody that, man, if they could get him to hit entering his second year with the program after redshirting this year, that would be really, really important for the development of this defensive line long term, because, man, Dakota Dixon and Keith Doty really check the boxes physically. The edges are fine. If you have Trey Wilson coming back, Ja'Kai Lang coming back, Billy Walton coming back, Deshaun Warner coming back, then you have Jalen Shivers who's redshirting. That's a good long-term projection. Hudson Woods is coming in the 2026 class, but you're fine next year. Akil Washington, if you medically redshirt him and get him back next year. The edges are fine. You could argue you need to bring in one more difference maker, but I would argue shifting that rev share just a touch maybe, and you're going to have to go back in on going after those big defensive tackles. Jonathan Jefferson's going to be back. Man, having him back will be huge, but you lose Jeffrey Emba. You probably lose Terry Webb from what I understand. You lose Shaq Spears, but then you get Kevin Allen and Wu Spencer back. That's a nice little caveat there for this defensive line long term, but they're going to have to be portal heavy again. And I think for me, watching that defensive line group and seeing Calvin Thibodeau maybe find a way to get one of these guys to step up and play early, that would be important. So those are some of my early playing time type of freshmen to watch from the class of 2026. Do want to remind you guys, of course, about our friends at Socorro Tequila as well. Go to their website. You could click the link in the description of this podcast and get taken right to the homepage where you can find their entire selection of Socorro Tequila. And when you go to Manny's Tex-Mex, make sure you ask for Socorro in your margarita. It is just so clean. It is a terrific product. It is now award-winning. You see the awards there on the website if you're watching on our YouTube channel. And it's just a terrific sip. I tell you guys, I'm making some of these cocktails, or just sticking with a very clean kind of tequila water, tequila and club soda type of mixture. And it's just so refreshing. So make sure you guys enjoy a glass of your favorite tequila recipe with our friends at Socorro Tequila. So appreciate their support of the On the Pony Express podcast and Manny's. This is the last week to support the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation fundraiser with our friends at Manny's. Go to Manny's Tex-Mex, 4 locations across DFW, where you can buy a Komen Rita, support the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation, and for every Komen Rita sold in October, they'll donate $1 to the Susan G. Komen Foundation, again, for breast cancer research. So great opportunity to enjoy a great margarita. And again, Socorro's there too. So it's a win-win. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They're hitting our friends at Manny's and Socorro. As we roll on the recruiting show here on the Pony Express podcast, do want to say as well that this recruiting weekend for Miami is going to be a big one. This is, I think, a game that SMU is really excited about, getting some recruits in there. The ACC huddle's coming. You've got Josh Pate who's coming. You didn't get College Game Day, but you get the huddle. You get Josh Pate on the sidelines. That is a big deal. And I would fully expect this game to be sold out. It's homecoming weekend at SMU. This is absolutely going to really boost that feeling around the program. If you get that sellout crowd, you get that environment in front of these prospects, helps out with the 27 class, helps out with 28. That's so important for this group to make sure it's gonna happen and show the support. And that's why, I mean, that's the next step for this program. Is somebody said it on the Pony Express today. You know, SMU fans have to show up despite everything going wrong last weekend at Wake, despite this season being filled with games that are woulda, coulda, shouldas. You know, this team still went on the road and beat Clemson. It still has a big game feel to it because both of these programs are playing this ball game, and it's an elimination game for the ACC championship. Whoever loses is out. Their dreams of going to Charlotte are over. And so it is still a big game. It is still a big atmosphere. It's going to be on ESPN. So a big opportunity for this staff. So make sure you stay locked into ontheponyexpress.com to get the rundown on who is going to be in Ford Stadium on Saturday, bright and early, for that 11 a.m. kick. But also do want to say that SMU working diligently on the recruiting side of things in the JUCO front. And I love this type of stuff. You know, I think this is a lost art, is working the junior college ranks. And the latest one that SMU is working on is Tavion Atkinson. He is one of the top defensive linemen in the junior college ranks. Big, 6'4", 280-pound defensive lineman who's out of Trinity Valley, so right down the road from SMU. He's originally from Houston. He's got offers from the likes of Mississippi State, Kentucky, Georgia even offered back in the spring, I believe. But he is a big dude, and he has scheduled an official visit to SMU for next month. So make sure you head to ontheponyexpress.com, get the details on when. But he is going to get a chance to get a look at SMU, and so it's important for this program to really get a look at, you know, players like this in the junior college ranks. I mean, this is not this is not one to scoff at all, that SMU is getting a chance with Tavion Atkinson here. And if you're watching on YouTube, just pop the huddle on. This is one of the most productive junior college defensive linemen that I've probably seen, just as far as his stats go. You know, I mean, he had, I think, something like 5 sacks, but he had 13 tackles for loss. He has something like 70 tackles over the last 2 years. Maybe it was even this year. Pulling it up right now. So he had 67 total tackles this year, and then had 11 sacks. So he had 4 in 2020, or excuse me, sorry, I was looking at last year. He has 38 total tackles this year in 6 games, 3 less than last year's, and has 4 sacks on the year, 5 TFLs, which is the same as last year. But this is probably similar to Elijah Roberts, but a bigger body that would play more consistently inside. This is where SMU really needs to kind of make, I think, a lot of moves with. These highly touted JUCO guys are completely overlooked. SMU obviously has to go out into the transfer portal and make a move with a lot of these prospects and get them to, you know, come to SMU, and you've got to deal with NIL and so many more agents. And the junior college guys just at this point, I would say, are a little bit more chill than some of these transfers that have, you know, agents. Not that these guys don't, but it's just a different world coming from JUCO. You got to earn so much more. And Tavion Atkinson has really stuck with it, been super productive the last 2 years. So you see him chase this down. That's unbelievable. That's great. That's what you want to see. Junior college guy making plays. He had a few offers out of high school, so he's not, you know, some nobody either that has just kind of emerged. He's been on college radars for a minute, but played the last 2 years in JUCO and has really done a nice job. So I think SMU would be wise here to turn the heat up. Mississippi State is probably the biggest challenger. He is set to visit there, I believe, either this weekend or next. SMU has to make sure that they at least get their shot at him. You know, this would help a lot for Calvin Thibodeau to have one big defensive end, kind of a 3-tech type of defensive tackle, potentially not a true nose by any means, but somebody that would pair nicely next to a Jonathan Jefferson, or maybe even kick out to that strong side defensive end spot like Elijah Roberts played, with his size and athleticism, and make things happen. And that would be to go into that portal window and late signing period with somebody like Tavion Atkinson already locked in I think that's important. And so they need to continue to mine these junior college ranks. I think it really helped them overall when it comes to figuring out how they can then make some of the money work with some of the bigger guys. And not saying that Tavion Atkinson isn't going to get his, but you have these chances with some of these players where you can go out and make waves with them before that transfer portal window. You're sitting in a better position with a Bird and, just somebody already committed. That's where SMU needs to, finish strong here this cycle. They would love to flip somebody from the high school ranks, but it's hard out there. College coaches don't want that flip process to hit them and hit them hard. But SMU is going to try. It wouldn't shock me if we saw a guy or two over the next few weeks end up visiting or taking a harder look and things like that. But for SMU, they need to really kind of have the gas pedal down on getting ahead of this defensive line search for these new starters along the interior. And if you want to add an end as well, because it is such a super competitive market. And on top of that, you saw last year what happened where SMU ended up having to basically circle back with guys like Jeffrey Emba and Terry Webb and really make sure that they got locked in. And then you added Shaq and Wu in the spring. Get ahead of it, get more guys already locked in, and then figure out where it goes. This is a huge, huge point for the end of this 2026 recruiting cycle. Get a guy like Tavion Atkinson on board. So with that, guys, do want to remind you one final time about our friend Andy Ludicky, myperfectfranchise.net. He is the go-to guy when it comes to leaving the corporate rat race for the American dream. Reach out to him today. He'll get you hooked up with the franchise that works for you, whether it be kind of brick and mortar, whether it be a huge time investment, whether it be kind of a side hustle. 404-973-9901 is where you can reach him. That's Andy, A-N-D-Y, at myperfectfranchise.net. Reach out to him today. He'll get you all hooked up with the franchise world and help you explore, if this is something that you want to do and it's the right time for you and your family to go about it. So we appreciate Andy Ludicky for supporting us at the On the Pony Express podcast. So shout out to you guys as well for supporting us. Hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed to the podcast channel, the YouTube channel. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for us. Doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't get you on an email or anything like that. Just hit the subscribe button for us. We appreciate you guys listening, and we will catch you next time on another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We appreciate our friends at Horn Legend for all they do for us, producing the recruiting show. Catch you next time. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.